That is not good. There we go. For some reason, we got a really dark screen today. Hold on. I'm trying to fix some things here. Things are not going very well. Camera-wise today. That seems better. Sort of. For whatever reason, it shifts on me. But I'm trying to get everything in. I wasn't fully ready, and it went live on me. But I also hit the button, so it was my fault. So, welcome to another episode. Hold on. I probably could have started over, but I decided against it. Hold on. Got one more thing to do. All right. This is a mess of a show today. Okay. So, sorry about that weird opening. Y'all know how our shows are. I purposely don't put, or me and my wife both, purposely don't put a lot of production value on our shows. One, because we do it strictly for fun. We used to throw up a bunch of fancy lights at one point. We would try to get a big production. But early on the shows, when we were doing them just in our living room at our old house, it was just kind of hodgepodge. We'd throw it together, and the dog would show up, or the cat would walk across the table, and then we'd fight about stuff or whatever. So we tried to professionalize it up, and then we had people complain. They're like, "No, we like it the way it is." We've had moments where lamps fell over on us in the middle of shows, stuff, the cameras have fallen over. So it became kind of our niche thing. Because we've rearranged some of our studio room, we're still dealing. Now we're going to have better lighting. I'm going to have to put a blackout thing on this window. We shifted it on purpose because of the way the room itself is working. So it was obviously way better when we had the backdrop of the movies, which is all this walls over here. But that's not how the room is set up now, because it's being used for a theater room as well as some other stuff, and we couldn't really do that. So anyway, that's irrelevant. Welcome to another episode of Martial Arts Movie Mondays. I know we haven't been as consistent lately. I'm trying to get back to it. Things have been kind of crazy with just life stuff and Corona stuff and everything else. So it's been really hard to stay consistent, but I'm here. I know you probably can't see it because it's a little bit dark. I can't figure out. 1 minute it's very light in here. It was light a second ago. All of a sudden it darkened on me. But today we're going to talk about, well, let me start. Is obviously you can see Van Damme's here on the cover. You can see the name of the movie. But if you've ever watched one of these episodes, we dive into a martial arts movie in my collection, old, new, whatever it is. And I'm a huge martial arts fan. Not only is it my full-time job, I teach Taekwondo and Muay Thai, but I just love martial arts flicks in general, and all movies pretty, but martial arts is my go-to thing. I'm a big Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. I recognize he's made some stinkers, but I love Van Damme movies. So that's why I do a lot of them. Hence, I'm wearing the shirt. So if you see the Van Damme shirt popping up, you know that we're going to talk about a Van Damme movie of some sort. And today we're going to talk about his 1986 flick, No Retreat, No Surrender, which was not technically his first film. He did star in a movie called Monaco Forever, and he also had he had played an early version of the Predator before they changed the design and the idea. He was also you can see him in the original Break-In movie. He's on the very first beach scene where there's breakdance sequences in the back, and like a one-lit, whatever you want to call it. Wrestling type thing, dancing behind them during the breakdancing scene, and you see him plain as day. So he had done some stuff before, but this was probably one of his first big American releases. Now the poster you have here, the box cover you have now, this is the re-release version of the image that once Van Damme became who he is now. They re-released the movie with his image on the front as though he's the star, because he is not the star of this film. The original cover was like a painted type cover, which I always thought was a cool poster of Van Damme head and Kurt McKinney, who's the star of the movie, actually facing off, and you got two flags. It's like an American flag and a Russian flag, and then fighting, and it creates this very Rocky IV vibe, which is nothing like what the movie is about. Van Damme is barely in the movie, but he has a very very memorable sequences because he shows up at the very beginning and then he's in the main fights at the very end. So he is very prominent in the movie in that regard. But 90% of the movie is Kurt McKinney. Now, this movie actually holds a very special place in my heart. I'll be first to tell you, I know it is not a great movie. The acting is bad. The dialogue is bad. The premise is silly at times, probably very often. It's stereotypical 80s vibe with the bully kids and different things. It's got a full-on Karate Kid element to it. There's a lot of things about this movie that if you were to watch it, you're just like, this movie is crap. I love this movie. I have watched this movie a ton of times, and I'm going to explain to you today why. As we do with this show, we talk about not only the movies themselves, but how they've influenced my martial arts journey. As someone who's done martial arts well over 35 years, I have been influenced by not only the people I train with, the instructors, other people that I've met that do different systems, friends and whatnot, but also specific martial artists in movies, specific martial artists in just the martial arts world, but then things in different elements of the movies. Now, this specific one, I saw No Retreat, No Surrender in the theater when it came out. I had no idea who Van Damme was, like anybody else. I just knew it was a martial arts flick. Me and my dad went to see it, and that was kind of a big thing. My dad is still alive. It's not one of these sad, sappy stories that I'm about to go into. But my dad was also is a martial artist as well. He's retired, but he is the reason that I got into it. He's the reason I stayed with it. And we used to watch a ton of karate martial arts flicks together. We saw Jim Cotta at the theater together, Bloodsport. We saw this one. We saw a lot of Chuck Norris movies in the theater together, Karate Kid in the theater together. We also used to watch a lot of the Kung Fu Theater, which I love a lot of those movies. So this movie, first and foremost, has a place of being one of those nostalgic movies that I remember seeing in the theater and remember how I thought this was the most awesome movie I'd ever seen at the time. It was just like, oh my God, there's Bruce Lee's ghost, there's martial artists, there's martial arts, there's comedy, there's breakdancing, there's everything you could think of in an 80s flick that you want. And then there's some new guy that I'd never heard of, just Ivan the Russian. That's all I knew was Ivan the Russian. And instantly I fell in love and became a fan of Van Damme the moment I saw Ivan the Russian do his first big kick of the film, which is jumping off someone's back and doing a jumping side kick into another character. And this was done kind of shot in slow motion, and I was like, oh my God, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it wasn't because it was overly impressive. It was just, I think part of it was such, his technique to his kicks has always been like flawless, but the slow motion nature of it, him jumping off of somebody else that I hadn't seen like that before, and it showing the slow motion of it kicking and seeing his form made me like, oh my God, this guy can kick. And then in the second half of the film, or the third act, when he's fighting and throwing all these jump kicks and doing the splits on the ropes and all of his signature stuff, I was insanely impressed, and I fell in love as a fan, and I have been a hardcore fan ever since. So, we talked about the last episode, we talked about Bloodsport, and that movie came out. I didn't realize, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't realize that it was the same guy, but I knew I had seen him somewhere, but didn't realize where. And of course, it came back to this movie. But this isn't a Van Damme movie. Van Damme is in this movie, but this is not a Van Damme movie. This would be like saying that when Chuck Norris showed up in The Expendables, that's a Chuck Norris movie. That is not a Chuck Norris movie, but Chuck Norris is there. This movie is Kurt McKinney's movie. He carries the movie. He does an okay job. Acting-wise, like I said, is pretty shoddy in this, but it felt like pretty stereotypical 80s. You got the bully kids, you got the fat kids, you got the breakdancers, you got the boy falling in love with the girl, and the bully that wants to be with a girl, and they fight, and they all seem to know karate, and they all seem to fight. It's very Karate Kid. One of the big differences I always thought was funny about this movie is there's the chubby guy who's kind of the bully, where a lot of the movies, that sort of character wouldn't be the popular one. They would be one of the ones that were the bullied one, or they would just be the what you call it, the thug of the main bully character, the Johnny, if you will. And in this case, it's weird dynamic because the film starts with this guy, this gross, and they played up the grossness because he was a fat guy. They played up like every time he eat, he'd have food on his face. Like the first time you see him, he's out standing in the middle of the street with a plate of cake, and he's taking handfuls of cake and then rubbing it on his own face and throwing it, and then he orders piles of cheeseburgers for everybody, and he eats it. And he's got mustache. I don't understand why they felt the need, other than comedy effect, to try to make him gross, but they did. And he's meant to be the comedy relief of the film, but he's set up as the main antagonist initially, but you never know why he's so upset. And I found out years later, there's a guy named RJ in the movie, and that character who befriends Kurt McKinney's character, they're kind of hanging out. Well, this guy has a problem with RJ, not with Kurt McKinney's character, not with Jason Sidwell. He has a problem with RJ. We don't know why. He just says something like, I have my reasons. And I found out later that there was supposed to be a scene shot in the high school where I believe it's RJ accidentally trips the other guy, spilling the food on himself, so now he's pissed off. So it would have made that feud make way more sense. Other than this, the way it's set up, it comes off more racist, kind of like, or not really racist, but undertones, like he probably just doesn't like him because he's black. And it's never said, it's never treated that way. That's more me saying that's the only thing I can think of what he did to upset him, because there's no setup for that, which in turn kind of loses the reason this guy is so grumpy and determined to cause problems. But then once we decide to go to the Cobra Kai school of the thing, which is a different vibe, but it's not a bad school, with Kyle Kreese, who's a mean, bad instructor. This school just got some bad apples in it, right? The lead guy that runs the school is not even there. He's like a championship fighter, and he comes back, and how'd everything go? Oh, everything's fine. He's like, okay. He's a very nice guy. He's the brother to the main love interest, and it's conveniently all connected, like all these movies. But it's funny because it literally took, after the fat guy gets beat up, it took him just telling the black belt in the room, that guy over there, he said their karate's better than your karate, and he did these things on me. And it's like one little scratch on his face, and then like some scratches on the arm. So he tells me, he's like, he did this, and he did this. He also did this. And the guy immediately says, good, let's beat him up. So it's like, there's a lot of bad vibes. Like, these people already had problems. So this was going to happen to somebody anyway. So anyway, I digress. So it sets up all the stereotypical stuff with some decent fights. Kurt McKinney, who is also a martial artist in real life, if I remember correctly, he has the play up that he's not a black belt, that he's more of a red belt level. And the other guy is just better than him, so he's got to take some beatings. And then it gets into the silly, weird part of the film that doesn't really fit the rest of the film. For whatever reason, they've decided to have Bruce Lee's ghost show up to train him because of his obsession with Bruce Lee. But then you never really fully know, did he ever really show up? Was this guy just a nut? So it's a kind of a a weird, out of place element to the film, but it gives you something fun to play with. Now, what's interesting is, let me find the guy's name. I apologize, I forgot to pull it up. What's interesting though, and I didn't know this until way recently, but I want to make sure I get the guy's name right. The sequence during those things with Bruce Lee is Tai Jong Kim. That's who plays, I believe that's right. Yeah, Tai Jong Kim, who plays Bruce Lee's spirit in the film, and he looks a little bit like Bruce Lee. It always was funny because when I was watching that film, even back then, I'm like, his mouth is not matching the dialogue very much like the old dubbed kung fu flicks. So I always thought it was done on purpose to give you that vibe and to match the narrative of the Bruce Lee stuff. But come to find out, I don't think the guy spoke English. And so they shot it and then went back and had to dub. So neither one of them knew what they were saying to each other during that whole scene, during those scenes. But what I found interesting about that actor is he was actually the stand-in for Bruce Lee in Game of Death and Game of Death 2. So when they shot, I'm assuming after Bruce Lee died, and they had to go back and, or they didn't have to, but they went back and finished the film. He was the person that was Bruce Lee, so ironically was brought in to play Bruce Lee's spirit. So that was kind of an interesting twist. Same thing kind of happens with a lot of the other martial artists in it. A lot of them are real martial artists like Kurt McKinney and Van Damme. You got Peter Sugarfoot Cunningham. Let me see if it has the other, because I don't know all their guys' names, but I don't know if they have there. I won't go into all of them. But anyway, there's a lot of the guys in it are really actual martial artists, and it shows. There's some really good, especially the final fight, which is kind of I think meant to be more of an exhibition boxing match, kickboxing match kind of thing, turns into this just full out battle. With no rhyme or reason to it. No, the referee can't seem to control it. Nobody seems to care what they've done. And it just essentially, excuse me, Van Damme just beating everybody up until miraculously Kurt McKinney comes to take Jason Stillwell comes to save the day because he's been training with the Ghost of Bruce Lee for I'm assuming it's been a week the way it's played up. But it's went from an average martial artist to this super badass that can destroy Van Damme, who has been destroying all these champion kickboxers in the film. But although the fight scenes are really well done, there's some of the moments that look really good because they're really done. I remember reading stories that I believe Van Damme knocked out Peter Cunningham at one point. I believe he, in the opening sequence when he jump kicks Jay Stillwell's dad in the karate school, I believe he jump kicked that guy actor in the face numerous times, who I believe he was also a martial artist. So, I mean, it's known that Van Damme didn't have a lot of control in some of these early films. I don't know if that's changed. I mean, there was obviously a whole lawsuit about Cyborg, and I know that some of the people in this movie actually testified against him based on that same thing of his lack of control. So who knows? I don't know that for a fact, but No Retreat, No Surrender is one of those movies that it did inspire me on the martial arts side from seeing Van Damme's kicking and becoming more obsessed with kicking and some of the movements. There's some great choreography. All the fights feel very choreographed, but that's what I loved about them is I could watch them. They're not like a lot of the fights now. They're more about fast-paced speed, brutality. This is very kung fu in the U.S., but trying not to be kung fu kind of fight scenes of the 70s stuff. But it's also Cory Yuen who directed the film, who had done movies all the way, he'd been an actor, I'm assuming a martial arts actor, all the way through the 70s. And he had directed a lot of martial arts movies with Jet Li and things like that. So that was kind of the style that he was known for. What is this thing? Oh, that's something else. But so it fits the entire vibe of the flick. But they're fight scenes that you can watch. I could learn from them. I used to watch them all the time. When I got the movie on VHS, I would watch it, and I could see different angles and twists and turns. But I became obsessed with not only kicking even more so than I already was, but Van Damme himself. This is my segue into the Van Damme world. This was this was my gateway drug into all things Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I've been a fan ever since. And I will continue to be a fan no matter how bad his films are, how good his films are, how annoying people think he is or don't like him. I love the man. I don't know him personally. I love his stuff. I love his old movies. I even love some of his new movies. I love his Tostitos commercials. I love his van doing the splits commercials. I love him in the Expendables. There's not been a Van Damme I don't love. There's some movies I don't like so much, but Van Damme, I'm forever a fan. No matter what happens, I'll still be a fan of his old stuff. And this is the movie that did it. This is the movie that introduced me to Ivan the Russian, a.k.a. Jean-Claude Van Damme, who we now know as Van Damage. All right, so that's it for today. No idea what we're talking about yet. Next week, I still have a few other movies to get through to do the other one I've been really wanting to do. That's just like an 8-part series of films. We may do them all in one, or we may break it up in a few weeks. I may do that just to speed up the process and do them in sets of 2 or 3 and talk about them. But anyway, don't forget, hopefully we'll be back for tomorrow for another episode of TV Tuesdays. Me and the missus discuss all things TVs that we're watching. And then we'll be back here for another episode of Hollywood Matrimony Live on Sunday. And, of course, circle back to an all-new episode of Martial Arts Movie Mondays on Monday next week. And hopefully I'll be on point like we were this week, and I'll have better lighting. So I apologize it's so dark, but it is what it is. But don't forget, check out No Retreat, No Surrender if you haven't found it. They even made a No Retreat, No Surrender 2 with Cynthia Rothrock. I do not have that one, so I need to find it. I haven't seen that movie in years, so if I get a copy of it, I may talk about it one day too. But I just went blank. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be nice to one each other. Wear your mask. Watch the No Retreat, No Surrender. You'll have a blast with it. It's a cheesy, fun movie. And above all else, love one another. Be safe. Peace to you all. And I will see you next time. Keep your hands up. Bye.